like to open this address with some notable quotes. Oscar Wilde, "Experience is simply the name we give our mistakes." Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Do not waste yourself in rejection, nor bark against the bad, but chant the beauty of the good." And when I, like George Bernard Shaw, "My reputation grows with every failure." Most of us, in some way or other, will experience failure in our lives. Cherished hopes will not be realised, relationships will break down, professional advancement will not occur according to plans, and moral standards will be abandoned. We have to deal with these failures. The way in which we deal with them and the resources we bring to this challenge may determine the fundamental quality of our lives. The issue of failure and its associated personal implications and consequences has been floating in my head for some months. I'm not sure why. Perhaps we all assess our lives as global financial and other crises take hold, or perhaps simply as some of us become aware that we're no longer young. We cogitate, we review, we do the sums and peer at the result at life's bottom line. However, there's nothing like the prospect of a public airing of personal opinion to focus the mind. There were several questions I needed to ask and issues to revisit, including, why am I interested in failure? Why do I wish to talk about it? The answers are complex. I grew up in a family environment, perhaps like some of you, where personal failures receive much greater recognition than personal success. Indeed, my brothers and I were reared in an environment where we were consistently advised of our failings. Our successes were either largely disregarded or eclipsed by our apparent failures, however large or small. Therefore, as we grew up, we had to reinforce the concept of personal success and compensate for an early sense of inherent personal failure. To some extent, this may explain my interest in the concept of failure and how, as human beings, we deal with it. For some of us, our failures will be simply an expected and largely predictable series of bumps and undulations in the road of life. In fact, they may be recognised as stepping stones to success. For others, failure will be far more challenging and possess something of a traumatic quality, whatever the scope and gravity of the circumstances, and will contribute not to personal development, but to an erosion of confidence over time and through repetition. The need to redefine personal notions of success and failure as we mature and progress through life is not an unusual challenge. As individuals, we will not consistently and unwaveringly meet the range of expectations ranged up against us in our lives. We may do our best, we may have a clear and consistent image of what we expect of ourselves, and perhaps what others expect, but we will not meet these expectations anything like perfectly. We will all, from time to time, fall short. Consistent and unwavering attainment of all of life's goals is an impossible demand. Whilst working towards personal goals can create for us a healthy tension in living fruitful lives, there also exists the risk of considerable distress, depending on how we meet the challenges of both succeeding and failing. I hope this address can remove the sense of taboo or poor taste or shame that appears to surround discussion of failure and provide some insight into the phenomenon and how we might deal with it as human beings. Importantly, I would like to address the concept of failure in the light of its indisputable relationship to success. Before I grapple with the issue of how people cope with failure, I should try to define the term. My pocket Oxford Dictionary defines the term to fail as to be deficient, to not suffice for, to disappoint the hopes of, to not succeed. A failure is defined to include an unsuccessful person or thing. Clearly, the concept can be applied to the physical world. We witness brake failures, engine failures, and power failures, all of which have the common characteristic of not having fundamentally met an engineering or design objective to do the job intended. We are, according to some, in the middle of a market failure. Human beings, however, are not machines or engineered systems designed according to basic physics principles. Our judgment of whether we have succeeded or failed as human beings will be highly individualised and depend considerably on a range of psychological and genetic factors that make each of us what we are. Additionally, at a social level, there are expectations of our behaviour that also present criteria by which we and others judge our successes and failures. At a universal level, the goal of humanity is perplexing and elusive and has given rise to religious, philosophical and spiritual thinking designed to address what is largely unfathomable in simply humanistic terms. The criteria for living in this sense, and again providing a measure for individual success or failure, are purportedly derived from certain universal truths designed to guide human behaviour. The criteria for success and its antithesis failure are therefore derived from three fundamental and interrelated sources: the individual psyche, societal expectations, and what for some are timeless universal standards. As the title of this address suggests, I believe it's not so much a matter of whether we fail, but how we manage that experience in our lives and assimilate it as a contributor to our successes. However, how we respond to failure may be determined to some extent by an understanding of factors that somehow lead to our perception that certain circumstances constitute personal failure or lack of success. What are the emotions that can arise from failure? Principally shame, or at least embarrassment, usually disappointment, and sometimes anger and frustration. In some cases, a personal failure does justify our feeling ashamed. Failing to pass an examination or formal test of some sort because we were simply too lazy to undertake the prior study or work might engender justifiable feelings of shame. Defrauding our employer or sleeping with our best friend's partner might also provide fertile ground for a modicum of shame. But failure to aspire to externally imposed expectations, whether by individuals or by society as a whole, may not justify such an emotional response. It may be the case that part of the answer to dealing with failure is to develop somehow the capacity to assess the validity of the criteria that we are applying in measuring our success or failure. What are legitimate personal goals for us in life? Perhaps our successes and failures should be based upon an identification of our real, authentic selves. We may then be in a position to experience failure on our terms and not someone else's, or the ever-changing and often superficial expectations of the society in which we exist. I have attempted to expand on the definition of failure I quoted earlier. I think there are at least 5 broad categories of failure. First, I believe that failure can be an objective appreciation that an outcome did not meet standards of action or behaviour that are generally accepted by civilised societies as necessary and legitimate. This, I suggest, is an essential element of being human. We exist in a framework where society sets standards of existence, acceptable behaviour and achievement in order to be recognised as civilised individuals and collectively as a civilised society, as well as establishing norms to generally regulate human behaviour. They include fundamental moral standards, for example, generally not lying, deceiving or using violence as a means of achieving personal or other goals. They also include most laws, occupational and educational standards, failing or passing a school or university exam, and winning or losing a football or netball game. We will all at times fall short of these standards and have to deal with it. Like death and taxes, it is one of life's certainties.